the blue wave is getting bigger, and President Trump is facing more resistance than he has ever faced before. Today, even the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, pushed back against the president after Trump tried to blame, quote, an Obama judge for his administration's latest court loss. We're going to have more on Chief Justice Roberts' defense of the federal courts against the president and the unprecedented war of words that followed later in the hour. But there's resistance outside the courtroom that might have even more long-lasting consequences for President Trump. Michael Moore joins me in just a moment with a fresh perspective on what comes after America's historic rebuke of President Trump in the midterms. And yes, it was historic. The Cook Political Report's David Wasserman now says that the Democrats' margin in raw House votes breaks the record for the biggest win by either party in the history of midterm elections. The vote total from Cook shows Democrats won 8.9 million more House votes than Republicans did, with 59.3 million votes to Republicans' 50.4 million votes. That Democratic lead in raw votes is even bigger than the previous record in the 1974 midterms that happened just a few months after President Richard Nixon resigned in disgrace following Watergate. Let that sink in for a moment. Voters chose Democrats by more votes under President Trump than they chose Democrats after Watergate. That's not just embarrassing. It's hard to imagine a more worrying statistic for President Trump as he faces his own re-election prospects in 2020, except maybe this. Democratic pollster Stan Greenberg has a new piece in the New York Times where he concludes that Trump is beginning to lose his grip with the voters who elected him. Greenberg says it wasn't just the reliable Democratic coalition that drove the blue wave in these last midterms. Quote, the 2018 election was much bigger than that. It was transformative, knocking down what we assumed were electoral college certainties. Democrats got their wave in part because a significant portion of male and female white working class voters abandoned Mr. Trump and his Republican allies. Democrats made their biggest gains in the rural parts of the country. That was the shocker. The Democratic wave exposed Mr. Trump's vulnerability and suggests a less polarized country. I thought it would take Mr. Trump's defeat in 2020 for America to be liberated from this suffocating polarization, but it may have already begun, end quote. And the losses might get bigger for Donald Trump next Tuesday in Mississippi, which hasn't had a Democratic senator since 1982. A Senate runoff that should have been an easy Republican win is now looking uncertain. Republican Cindy Hyde-Smith has made gaffe after gaffe, starting with saying that she'd like to attend a public hanging, which some people in Mississippi are old enough to remember as a lynching. And that's given Democrat Mike Espy a chance. He is still a long shot. But Republicans are worried enough that the president will travel to Mississippi next week to campaign for Cindy Hyde-Smith. But even if the president holds on to Mississippi for Republicans, is there any doubt that, as Stan Greenberg writes, President Trump is beginning to lose his grip? Joining me now, Academy Award-winning documentary filmmaker Michael Moore. Michael, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Can you just say that last sentence again? It's losing his grip.
But it is kind of interesting, right? What Greenberg is writing is that some of Donald Trump's very faithful base, as we like to call it, in rural America is turning on him. Why do you even think that is?
Well, look what happened where I live in Michigan. The three states that gave Trump the presidency, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, all went blue 2 weeks ago. Democratic governors, Democratic senators in Michigan. We have a supermajority now in the Michigan Senate. 4 women at the top run the state. 2 women, Democrats, turned over 2 Republican seats in the Detroit area. So all of this is not surprising, what you just said or what Stan Greenberg wrote in the Times. If I'm anything tonight, I'm of a belief that we can take what we learned in a place like Michigan, and really crush it in 2020. But it will take some work, and it'll take the Democrats who got elected 2 weeks ago to really show the voters that they are going to do something, that they're going to stand for something. So their performance in these 2 years is very important. It's going to take a recruiting team to get beloved Americans running for office in 2020.
But we saw some of that.
We saw,
see
yes.
a Congress now that looks more like the face of
Correct.
America than we've seen in a long time.
More of that, and there was another story, I think it was in the Times, where they showed that those who ran out of the center and toward the left had a better chance of winning 2 weeks ago than those who thought, well, I better play this more conservatively as a Democrat. Those people lost. The people who ran more liberally won. And we need to, again, build on that. But I think here's the lesson I learned in Michigan, is that ballot proposals are the answer. George W. Bush and the Republicans knew this in 2004. They put 14 ballot measures in 14 states to outlaw gay marriage.
Right.
To make it
and
illegal.
That motivated people
to the polls,
who otherwise may not have gone to the polls.
And so Bush won his first popular vote in 2004, reelected, because they had all those people coming out. This is what we did in Michigan 2 weeks ago. We had a ballot proposal to legalize marijuana. Largest turnout of young people in we don't know when.
Right.
Came out to the polls. We had a ballot proposal to outlaw gerrymandering, make that part of the Constitution, and form a citizens bipartisan, nonpartisan commission. No politicians can be on the commission that will draw the map.
So let me just draw the distinction.
And that brought out a whole nother group of voters.
With legalizing marijuana, that was going to happen if the vote went through. With the gerrymandering, it wasn't going to change any of the districts in Michigan, obviously in that election, but it brought people out who are sick and tired of these stupid-shaped constituencies all across America.
Correct.
I mean, it's a laughingstock of the Democratic world that we've got these constituencies, these districts that are long and skinny and take turns and look like a salamander, hence the name gerrymander.
So by taking a stand and putting that on the ballot, African-American vote, so many people came out that didn't vote in 2016, and they came out. This is the way you bring people out who are, they don't vote that much, or they don't like the politicians, or the Democratic Party has not been responsive to them.
Right.
They can vote on a particular issue. So we need to, on the ballot in 2020, have ballot proposals, especially in the swing states, for legalizing marijuana, for free college, for the Equal Rights Amendment for women, and to outlaw gerrymandering. People right now they should talk about this tomorrow at dinner. And by the way, at dinner tomorrow, your conservative brother-in-law, this year, don't make him sit at the kids' table. Let him sit at the main table. We should be generous in victory. Be kind to him, and let him know that the things that we're going to push for, he's going to benefit.
So explain that.
Too.
Tell me why my conservative brother-in-law should think that figuring out a way to fix gerrymandered districts is good for him.
Well, I'll tell you, to any Trump voter, I think, and this is why Utah passed a anti-gerrymandering thing. They know we're coming. They know the Democrats, the liberals, we're the majority of the country. We already know that from the popular vote 2 years ago. We know it from the popular vote this month. They know we're coming. And when we're back in power, and we've got the House and the Senate and the White House, they don't want those gerrymandering laws that they've been benefiting from. They want to fix that now. So you actually found that Republicans are voting, smart Republicans are voting for this because they're going to be the negative beneficiary, not the.
They'll be on the wrong side of that.
On the wrong side of that. So basically, it's in their best interest for all of us to get rid of gerrymandering and any kind of voter suppression. And that's what we did in Michigan.
Kind of fascinated by the voter
suppression. That brought
out
a whole new bunch of people.
The degree to which voter suppression is alive and well in America, in Kansas, in Georgia. I mean, it's kind of remarkable that it's getting worse. We should be trying to get people out to vote any way possible. And fortunately, lots of people did come out and vote this time.
Right.
But why we are putting impediments to people voting, the signature match law in Georgia is just stupid. Cindy McCain herself said sometimes she signs Cindy McCain, sometimes she signs C.
It's
McCain.
Anti-American.
It's anti-American.
And it's to the troops who Trump does not respect, who he used as a photo op down on the border for the election. And who he never bothers to visit, never bothers to say a good word about them. They volunteer to risk their lives so that we get to have certain basic democratic rights. The most basic democratic right is the right to vote, is the right for you and I to have a say. If that is denied to any American, all of us should be shamed by this. It's the absolute worst thing to do. People have died in many of our families in past wars or whatever. And to dishonor their death so that we could have this by trying to rig the system so that those who don't have the most votes can end up with the most seats. It's like...
Which has happened a lot in this country. I mean, the number of voters disenfranchised by these laws in Georgia, as an example, I mean, we're not talking about tens of thousands. We're actually talking about hundreds of thousands of people.
Right, but what I say to Republicans is why... How do you feel when you win a game and you know that you won it because
it was rigged?
It was rigged, or the table shifted, or you only had to run the ball back 80 yards instead of 100 yards. How do you feel about that? I mean, do you feel like you're the winner? I wouldn't feel good about it. You know, when I was in junior high school, I was playing basketball, and I was over in the far corner, and I did a hook shot from the far corner where the two out-of-bounds lines meet, and I saw my foot go out of bounds, and it went over my head, and I made a swish in the basket, and the refs didn't see it, and I said to the ref, I stepped out of bounds, and the coach was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "It wasn't a fair basket." How would I feel if we won and it was because of that basket, which I know wasn't right because I'd stepped out of bounds?
I'm not sure everybody in the country is burdened with that.
Well,
morality.
Aren't we all raised that way to know what's right and wrong? It's so basic.
You and I,
it's not Democratic or Republican, is it? Isn't it basic?
You and I were raised on two sides of another border. You're from Michigan. I'm from Toronto. Cold places. We're used to the cold. Tonight, President Trump tweeted about the cold. He said, "Brutal and extended cold blast could shatter all records." Whatever happened to global warming? Michael, what does this get somebody? What does it get people who deny climate change? Other than if you have stock in a coal company or an oil company, what does it get you to be on the wrong side of this thing? Well,
look, you have a billionaire for president, and he's for anything that benefits the wealthy. That's his job. That's what he's supposed to advocate for. But to your conservative brother-in-law who's sitting at the table tomorrow on Thanksgiving, say to him, look, climate change, when we're in office, we're going to fix that. We're going to really do our best. It may be too late, but we're going to do our best to fix this. And you're going to benefit from it. We're not doing it just for our people, for the Democrats.
Right. That's my point.
We're going to make sure your house doesn't burn
partisan?
down. Your house doesn't go down in a mudslide. You're not underwater. You're going to benefit from this, too. You should come along with this because it benefits you. I think that's the way you have to. But with Trump, look, you guys, you show these tweets all day long on this network, on the other networks. It's nonstop. And it was, I guess, funny to some people at first. And then it went to shaking our heads like, can you believe this? And now it's like, wow, I think everybody's realized with him essentially sanctioning the murder of the Washington Post journalist, saying that about the troops this week, saying that about Admiral McRaven, all of this, I think it's starting to dawn on people. And so that report you read from the New York Times, they're not surprised. The people out there who live in rural America, they don't like hearing that. They thought he'd be like a Molotov they could throw into a system that hadn't benefited them.
And one can understand why they wanted that.
Blow it up.
That. You come from rural America.
Yes, well, that's why I said before the election that this is going to happen because people are angry. Well, he has helped to blow up pieces of our democracy, and it hasn't benefited anybody, and nobody's made any money off his tax cut. And he can point to the stock market all he wants, but that doesn't affect that person.
More than half of Americans don't.
I mean, think about this. People in Kansas said to themselves, what could I do now to send a message?
Right.
I know. I'm going to send a congresswoman who is a lesbian, Native American, mixed martial arts fighter.
Right. And that
from Kansas.
That happened in a lot of places in America.
In a lot of Oklahoma City sent a Democrat. Utah Today, that was called.
A gay governor in Colorado, a bisexual senator, a Muslim refugee.
The country has changed. And this is what I say to the leadership of the Democratic Party. Please understand it's changed. Come along with the change here. Don't hold back. Don't think anymore, well, we can have half health care. No, we need full universal health care for everyone.
Like every developed country in the world.
Like every other country. Just look at what Canada does. Canada's stolen enough from this country. You take, everything we do. You go to Canada, we see you doing everything we do. It's time we take something from you.
Right.
Universal health care. Oh, and the other thing, too. Hunting is the #1 sport in Canada, more so than hockey.
That's correct.
There are 7 million registered guns in the nation of Canada, which only has 34, 35 million people.
Right.
All right. How many gun murders last year? 100, 200?
Yeah, it's very small
Nothing.
compared to, yeah.
Nothing. All right. So clearly you figured out how to deal with this issue. We need to show some humility and say, you know, we're so confident about our goodness here at this Thanksgiving that we need to reach out to others and say, how'd you do this? How do you do that without mass shootings in Canada? How do you pay for it? Everybody gets to see a doctor, and that ends up with you Canadians living, not you, you're an American now, but hang on to your Canadian passport.
I got it. It's
Plan
in a
B.
safe.
Plan B, Ali, just saying. But you live 3 to 4 years longer than we do on average.
Almost every outcome in health is better in other OECD countries for less than half the cost that Americans pay.
Half the cost. Why wouldn't you be for, if you're conservative, why wouldn't you be for that?
So let me ask you a question. A third of the country, a quarter of the country, angry, intolerant, hard to reconcile. But what do the rest of us have to do? How much intolerance do we tolerate in order to build bridges of empathy, to talk to people who are legitimately angry? Maybe not for the reasons that we believe, but they really are angry. They've not seen their wages go up while home prices go up and stock prices go up and the rich get richer. They see their incomes. You've studied this. You've done films about this.
You can't, first of all, it's hard. You can't build a bridge to a racist or a misogynist. You know, they have to be shunned and treated like we treated smokers 20 years ago, 10 years ago. You know, I walked down the street the other day with my sister, and I said, let's just see how long we can go before we see somebody smoking. Not the people sitting outside the buildings desperate to grab 5 minutes, but literally walking down the street. We walked 10, 20 minutes. There's never not a smoker. Racist and misogynist shunned. But conservatives, Republicans, whatever, who do care about this country and are not bigots, they're just rightfully angry. We can reach out to them and say, come on, we can create a good, give us a chance. We'll create this good America, and it'll look like the real America. Congress now does look more like that on the Democratic side. We'll build a better country, and when we have Thanksgiving together in years in the future, you know, we can have our disagreements, and we can have a great debate. But in the end, we all love this country, and we're going to sink or swim together. And I don't think any of us want to sink. So we need to come together on this. And my request to the conservatives who might be watching is to give this a shot. Give these Democrats who just got elected a shot. And we'll get back in the White House and the Senate in 2020. And we will build a country where your houses on fire are going to go into the ocean in a mudslide.
Michael, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to
Canadian
you too.
Thanksgiving's in October.
That's right.
Just saying.
But I've still got the passport, so if you ever need a hand.
When you have a dual passport like this, do you get turkey twice?
You get turkey twice. You get it in October, and then you get it in November. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.